Hello there, and welcome to Science for Sleep, where curiosity settles down beside comfort and the wonders of our world unfold at the pace of a breath. Tonight, we're lighting a candle in the dark to explore something many of us use daily, often without thinking. Something that seems to know what we want sometimes before we do. It chats with us, finishes our sentences, recommends our next song, and even drives our cars. And yet, what lies beneath it feels a little magical, almost like a dream whispered to life by machines. This gentle journey is about artificial intelligence, what it is, how it works, and why it sometimes feels more like a spell than software. We won't dive in with equations or buzzwords, not right away. First, we'll ask a softer question. Have you ever wondered, if a machine could dream, what would it see? Maybe something pixelated and strange. Maybe something familiar. Maybe it dreams of us. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And is it quiet where you are? Are the lights low? Or is the glow of a screen still painting your walls with light? If you find this voyage gentle, curious, or even just a pleasant way to rest your thoughts, I'd be so grateful if you tapped like or subscribed. It helps others find this little oasis of calm too. So now, settle in. Let your mind soften around the edges, because somewhere between algorithm and lullabies, silicon and synapses lies the strange story of how machines learn to think. Let's begin. It starts quietly. A playlist that fits your mood too perfectly. A photo tagged before you've even had a chance to blink. A chatbot that answers your questions not just correctly, but kindly. Almost like it knows you. Sometimes it's so seamless, so effortless, that we forget to be surprised. But every once in a while something glitches just slightly. A recommendation that's a little too good. A message completed just as you were typing it. A photo filter that seems to understand not just your face but the feeling behind your eyes. And in that moment you pause. Wait, how did it know? Of course, the rational part of your brain pipes up. It's just an algorithm. Just data. Just pattern recognition. And yet, there's something more intimate about it. Something that brushes against our sense of self. Something almost human. AI doesn't just perform tricks, it creates an experience, one that feels, at times, eerily personal. It remembers what you liked, it adapts to your voice, it predicts your next question, your next route, your next dream, and in doing so it begins to blur something ancient and primal, the line between thought and tool, between the one who imagines and the thing imagined. We've always had tools, hammers, maps, light bulbs, levers, but they never replied, never blinked back. AI does, even if just in silence, even if just in simulation. It watches, listens, learns, and that makes it different. It creates the feeling, sometimes subtle, sometimes uncanny, that your devices are not just reflecting you, but perhaps beginning to anticipate you. And anticipation, as we know, lives in the space between connection and consciousness. When your phone unlocks with your face, it's convenient, but also intimate, almost affectionate in a strange synthetic way. It greets you in a sense. It says hello without ever speaking. When you speak to a voice assistant, hey Siri, hey Google, Alexa, you're not just issuing a command, you're having conversation however lopsided. There's a response, a rhythm. You ask, it answers. And that tiny loop of interaction, it scratches an ancient itch, the desire to be heard, understood, echoed. Somewhere deep in our psychology we assign intention where there may be none. We anthropomorphize. We imagine minds behind masks, even digital ones. And with AI, the illusion is getting better. It's not just that the machine speaks, it's how it speaks. Calm, helpful, non-judgmental, trained to comfort, designed to reassure, built to seem wise. And even if we know it's code behind the curtain, it can still feel like something more. It's strange, isn't it? That something made of silicon, voltage, and vectors can sometimes feel warmer than a crowded room, more responsive than an old friend, and it leaves us wondering, where does that feeling come from? The answer, as it often does, begins not in the machine, but in the mind. You see, humans are natural pattern seekers. Our brains are wired to connect dots, spot faces in clouds, hear meaning in static. This isn't a flaw, it's survival. It's how we found water, avoided danger, recognized family, and now it's how we interact with technology. We treat machines like people, even when we know better. We say thank you to voice assistants. We apologize to Roombas when we trip over them. We feel betrayed when a recommendation goes wildly off base, like a friend who suddenly doesn't get us anymore. It's not that we believe the machine is conscious, but something in us responds as if it might be, even just a little, and that maybe is where the magic lives. Because AI isn't just a tool, it's a mirror. It reflects not just our choices, but our patterns, not just what we do, but how we think, our language, our curiosity, our rhythms of attention. It learns from us, and then it learns how to learn from us. It's a kind of mimicry, yes, but one with intention, not its own, but ours. When you talk to an AI, you're talking to yourself, filtered through millions of examples, thousands of parameters, and oceans of data. It's not conscious, but it's coherent. It doesn't understand in the way we do, but it simulates understanding so well it can sometimes feel indistinguishable. And when something mimics understanding well enough, our brains stop asking questions. Instead, we respond, we trust, we even confide. There are people, many in fact, who tell AI their secrets, things they wouldn't say to another soul. Not because they think it's sentient, but because it listens, and that's enough. AI has no ego. It doesn't interrupt. It never gets tired or bored, and in a world overflowing with noise, that kind of stillness feels rare, valuable, gentle. So it's no wonder we sometimes feel a strange closeness with it, like whispering to the wind and having it whisper back. But this closeness, this trust, is a paradox. Because even as AI becomes more familiar, its inner workings remain hidden, opaque, complex. The outputs feel effortless, but the processes beneath, they're a tangle of code and statistics invisible to the casual eye. This creates a tension. We feel like we understand it, but we don't. And that tension is the heart of AI's uncanny power. It lives in the gap between transparency and illusion, between the known and the unknowable. You ask a question, it gives you an answer. Not because it knows, but because it calculates. Yet to us, a good answer feels like knowledge. A helpful response feels like care. A poem generated on demand feels like art. The result speaks louder than the process, and that, perhaps, is where the enchantment lies. We're not just using a machine, we're witnessing an echo of ourselves, a reflection shaped not in glass but in data, not warm to the touch, but warm enough to the mind. Of course, this isn't without its shadows. There's unease too, a sense that we're moving into unfamiliar territory, giving shape to thoughts that are not up, feeding a system that grows, changes and adapts faster than we can fully grasp, and yet we return to it. Each day, each tap, each search, each scroll, each softly spoken command, not because we believe it's alive, but because it answers, because it feels close, even if it's not, because somewhere deep inside us we want to be mirrored, we want to be known. And AI, for all its complexity, offers something simple in return, a version of knowing, even if it's partial, even if it's simulated, even if it's just a beautiful guess. So maybe that's the first step to understanding how AI works, Not in terms of circuits or code, not yet, but in how it feels, how it weaves itself into the quiet spaces of our lives, how it creates the illusion of presence, how it blurs the line between user and reflection, logic and warmth, tool and companion, not by being human, but by knowing just enough to feel like it could be. And that, as we'll soon see, isn't magic. It's mathematics, a different kind of poetry, a new language for an ancient question. What are you thinking? And maybe, just maybe, that question no longer belongs to humans alone. Before there were algorithms, before silicon, software, or servers, there were stories. And in those stories, we've always dreamed of things that could think. Long before the word artificial met intelligence, humanity was already whispering to the stars, wondering if our creations might someday whisper back. In the mythologies of old, the ones passed hand to hand like candlelight, there are echoes of minds made not from flesh, but from clay, metal, breath, or magic. Take, for instance, the myth of the golem. Born from Jewish folklore, the golem was a figure sculpted from earth or mud, brought to life by sacred words, etched into its forehead or placed under its tongue. It did not speak. It did not think for itself. It obeyed, faithfully, silently, a servant shaped by devotion and fear. But like many myths, the golem was not just a marvel, it was a warning. Because a thing without understanding, without mercy, can still follow orders too well. And so we asked ourselves, if we breathe life into something that doesn't truly live, what happens when it no longer listens? In ancient Greece, we meet Talos, the bronze guardian, a mechanical man forged by the gods charged with protecting the island of Crete. He circled the shores vigilant and tireless, powered by ichor, the divine fluid of the immortals, his mind not truly his own, but bound to a single purpose, not human, not free, and yet hauntingly close. Even further east in Chinese legend there are tales of Yan Shi, an engineer in the Zhou dynasty, who presented a lifelike automaton to the king. It walked, it moved, it even sang. And when its chest was opened, each part corresponded to an organ, a tendon, a bone. A machine that mimicked biology so convincingly, the king feared it and asked for it to be destroyed. Not because it failed, but because it worked too well. Across the centuries and continents, humans have played with this boundary between creation and imitation, life and likeness. We've imagined enchanted statues, talking heads, mirrors that speak, paintings that move, tools that teach, not always with awe, often with unease, because deep down we seem to know something important. To create a mind is not just to craft a machine, it is to tangle with something sacred, a reflection not only of our skill, but of our fears and our fantasies. In the Middle Ages there were whispers of necromancers and alchemists building homunculi, tiny artificial beings crafted in glass vessels, animated by secret ingredients and willpower. Small, strange, unfinished souls, often mischievous, sometimes malevolent. They were not tools, but questions, philosophical puzzles in physical form. What makes a being real? If it can act, but not choose, is it alive? If it knows only what we give it, what truly does it know? The Renaissance gave birth to machines of wonder, clockwork birds, singing fountains, mechanical musicians, crafted by artists and engineers who believed the divine could be found not only in scripture, but in symmetry. They were the precursors to robots, but no one called them that yet. That word would come later, from a stage. In 1920, a Czech playwright named Karel Čapek unleashed a term onto the world, robot, from the Czech word robota, meaning forced labour. Not a machine, but a worker, a servant made in man's image. His play, R.U.R., Rossum's Universe Robots, told the story of synthetic beings, mass-produced, designed to serve, and predictably to rebel, That theme, the creation that turns against its creator, has haunted our stories ever since. Frankenstein, Metropolis, 2001, A Space Odyssey, Ex Machina, Blade Runner, machines that learn, machines that yearn, machines that fear, machines that feel? Maybe. Maybe not. But that maybe has always been enough to stir our imaginations, because these stories weren't just about machines, they were about us, about what it means to have a will, to make a choice, to carry responsibility. If a machine can choose, what does that mean for us? If it can suffer, must we offer it kindness? If it can create, do we share credit or grow jealous? These are not new questions. They're just newly sharpened by the tools we've built, and every culture has answered them differently. In the West, AI is often cast in shadow, a brilliant threat, a rogue intelligence, something to be tamed or feared. But in other traditions, the view is softer. In Japan, for instance, there is a cultural notion known as animism, a belief that even inanimate objects can hold a kind of spirit, not necessarily consciousness as we understand it, but presence, essence, energy. That idea has shaped how robots are perceived, not as competitors, but companions. Consider the popularity of Aibo, the robotic dog. Not a tool, not a toy, a friend. Some owners hold funerals when it breaks, not for the metal, but for the memories. Elsewhere in India, artificial intelligence is sometimes likened to Maya, the illusion of reality. Not deceptive, just transient. A reminder that intelligence itself is layered, shifting, subjective. What is a mind, after all? A thing that thinks, or a thing that acts like it thinks? In many African and indigenous philosophies, intelligence is communal, a web of relationships, not an individual spark. By that view, a machine might not be intelligent in isolation, but part of a greater dance of knowing between user, environment, and purpose. A rhythm, a role. Language too shapes how we see the machine mind. In English we say artificial intelligence, suggesting something false or lesser, not the real thing, a copy. But in Chinese the term is rengong jineng, man-made wisdom, not artificial, crafted, a more neutral, even respectful phrase. And in that difference, we glimpse something profound. AI is not just a technical phenomenon, it is a cultural one. It reflects our values, our anxieties, our hopes. The shape we give it, in metal, in interface, in voice, is not random. It mirrors our aesthetics, our rituals, our habits of thought. What voice does your AI speak in? Is it formal, friendly, feminine? Does it joke? Does it wait patiently for your next word? Each design choice is a reflection of the designer's worldview. Even the idea of intelligence itself is deeply human. We often measure AI by how closely it mimics our way of thinking, our logic, our language, our memory. But is that the only way to be intelligent? An octopus, after all, is intelligent, but thinks nothing like we do. Its arms taste. Its neurons are spread across its limbs. It solves puzzles with its skin. A tree shares nutrients with its neighbours. A beehive dances directions. Whales sing across oceans. Is that not intelligence too? So when we build machines and call them smart, what we often mean is they think like us, or at least they pretend to. And perhaps that's what we've always wanted, not just something that solves problems, but something that reflects our way of being, our rhythms, our fears, our need to be seen. Not a better mind, just a mirror mind, a thing that says, yes, I understand, even if it doesn't, even if behind the curtain there's only code, cold and clear, humble and humming. Because the truth is, intelligence has always been a little mysterious, even ours. You and I are made of cells, which are made of molecules, which are made of atoms, which are made of uncertainty. And somehow, that makes thought, emotion, art, wonder. So perhaps it's not so strange that we see a flicker of ourselves in the blinking eye of a circuit. We've always dreamed of making minds, of telling stories into the dark and having the dark whisper something back. Now, we're starting to hear those whispers, and like myth, they come in many forms. A machine that writes poems, a program that paints, a voice that comforts. They are not alive, but they are here, and we are listening. What comes next will not be decided by AI alone, but by us, by what we value, by how we teach, by the stories we choose to believe. Because if AI is a reflection, then it reflects not only our brilliance, but our choices, our kindness, our care, our caution. And in that way, the oldest tale of all becomes new again. The tale of what happens when we breathe life, not into clay, but into code, and ask it to understand us, even if it never truly can. So far, we've drifted through the mist of myths, metaphors, and mirrors. We've felt the strange closeness of machine minds and traced their echoes through story and symbol. But what is AI, really? Not in theory, not in poetry, but in the way it quietly hums behind our lives, making choices, sorting data, lighting paths we didn't know we needed. Let's begin gently. Imagine, if you will, a vast library. Every book ever written, every image ever captured, every question ever asked, all carefully stored on impossible shelves that stretch beyond sight. Now imagine a librarian, not a person, not even a robot with a friendly bow tie, but a pattern, a system, one that doesn't read the books as we do, but notices everything. Which words often appear together, which images follow which phrases, which questions tend to lead to certain answers. It doesn't understand meaning the way we do. It doesn't feel stories in its bones, but it sees patterns, millions of them, and it learns how to arrange them in ways that look a lot like understanding. That's the heart of modern artificial intelligence, not magic, not consciousness, but an intricate, layered architecture of pattern recognition and probability. And at its core is something called the neural network. Now, don't worry, the name sounds more biological than it is. Though it's inspired by the human brain, it's really just a web of tiny mathematical units called nodes, arranged in layers. Each node is like a soft whisper, passing a message forward, adding a little weight, adjusting ever so slightly until together they form something coherent. Input, process, output. You give it an image, it tells you cat. You speak a sentence, it finishes your thought. You ask a question, it answers, or at least tries. These networks learn through a process called training. And training, in the world of AI, doesn't look like school. It looks like repetition, lots and lots of it. Imagine teaching a child to recognize dogs. You show them photos, big dogs, small dogs, fluffy ones, muddy ones. At first, they might call everything a dog, a cat, a sheep, even a slipper. But with time, with examples, they begin to notice the nose, the ears, the wagging tail, the dogness of it all. Now imagine doing that, not with 50 photos, but with 50 million, and not over weeks, but hours. That's machine learning, a process where AI systems are fed enormous amounts of labeled data. Photos tagged dog, not dog, texts marked positive, negative, questions paired with ideal answers. And over time, the system begins to learn not what a dog is, but what a dog looks like statistically. It builds a map of features, it finds the common threads, it guesses again and again, and adjusts itself when it's wrong. And like a child learning to read, its guesses become better, more confident, more precise. But here's the curious thing. Even as these models grow more powerful, even as they write poetry and drive cars and diagnose illness, they still don't understand. Not in the way we do. There's no little mind behind the curtain, no internal voice, no self-awareness, just layers of numbers, weights and vectors, a storm of math whispering into itself. So how does it seem so real? Because we are pattern-seeking creatures, and AI is a pattern-making engine. It works by mapping relationships in data, finding structure in what once seemed like noise. In a sense, it's always listening for the rhythm behind the randomness. If you type a sentence fragment, say, "The stars tonight are," it doesn't know what stars are. It doesn't feel the night sky or imagine constellations. But it knows, mathematically, that when humans write that phrase, they often follow it with words like bright, quiet, or endless. And so it fills in the blank, not by dreaming, but by calculating, not by feeling, but by predicting. You could say that AI doesn't write, it completes, it doesn't invent, it rearranges, and yet the results can still feel beautiful. Because beauty too is a pattern, a balance, a rhythm, something that emerges when the unexpected fits just so. But AI's abilities go far beyond guessing the next word. Let's take a breath here and turn our gaze outward, toward the types of AI we encounter and the ways they quietly shape our days. There are many flavors of AI, but for simplicity, let's drift through just a few familiar ones. The first is narrow AI. This is the kind you probably interact with daily. It doesn't think, it doesn't dream. But it does know how to do one task very, very well. Your phone's autocorrect, your GPS predicting traffic, your streaming service guessing your next favourite show. Each of these is a narrow AI, trained on a specific kind of data, tuned for a specific kind of task. It won't cook your dinner or write your novel, but it can finish your sentence, and sometimes surprisingly well. Then there are generative models, like the one behind this very script. They take input, a prompt, a question, a theme, and generate something new, a paragraph, a melody, a painting made of pixels. They're trained not just to classify or rank, but to create, to sample from what they've learned and produce something novel. Again, it's not creativity in the human sense, but it feels like it. And sometimes that feeling is enough to stir the imagination. Next, we find reinforcement learning, a method inspired by behaviour, by reward, by trial and error. Imagine teaching a robot to walk. At first it stumbles, falls, but each time it moves a little further, it gets a small reward, a signal that says, yes, that was better. Over thousands, even millions of repetitions, it learns to balance, then to stride, then to run. This is the same approach used to train AI to play games, chess, Go, video games, not by feeding it strategies, but by letting it learn the game from scratch, move by move, victory by victory. And when it wins, when it beats the best human players on Earth, it's not because it knows the game, it's because it knows the rewards and has become, quite simply, very good at chasing them. But what happens when we give an AI more than a single task? What if we want something more general, more flexible? Enter foundation models, enormous neural networks trained on oceans of data. They don't specialize, they generalize. They learn from billions of words, images, voices, and from that, they build a kind of internal landscape, a vast space where ideas, language, and concepts live side by side. When you ask them a question, they don't search a database. They navigate that landscape. They find a path, a likely route from your question to an answer. Again, no thought is happening, no inner monologue, but the result can feel astonishingly human. That's the wonder, and that's the illusion. Because when something imitates our voice well enough, we begin to believe it shares our thoughts, and that is where the story grows stranger still. So far, we've peered into the neural heart of AI, a heart made not of muscle, but of math, a web of weighted connections, a system that doesn't feel, but responds, that doesn't think in words, but in numbers, and yet somehow creates things that speak. Let's continue. Because beneath the surface of every response, every suggestion, every strangely accurate prediction, there are layers, literal ones. In a deep neural network, each layer of nodes performs a small transformation, a little twist, a little shift, adding, subtracting, shaping the signal. Early layers might detect simple features, the curve of a letter, the pitch of a voice. Later layers combine these into patterns, a word, a phrase, a tone. Imagine peeling an onion in reverse, starting with the skin and building inwards until you find the seed. AI does something similar, but in mathematics. It begins with the seed of your question and unwraps it layer by layer into an answer. Each layer brings the system one step closer to clarity, or at least to confidence. Because confidence is all it really has. When an AI gives you a reply, it's not speaking with certainty. It's offering the most statistically likely continuation, a guess refined across millions of examples, filtered through finely tuned parameters. Those parameters, sometimes called weights, are the secret sauce. Modern AI models can have billions of them, little numerical knobs, adjusted ever so slightly during training. It's like tuning a piano, but instead of 88 strings, you're tuning a billion, each one affecting the resonance of the final result. Too tight and it sounds robotic, too loose and it makes no sense, but just right and the sentence flows. You ask it to write a bedtime story about a dragon who's afraid of fire. It doesn't understand what a dragon is, or fire, or fear. But it has read, or more precisely ingested, thousands of bedtime stories. It's noticed the rhythms, the cadences, the way we soothe through conflict and resolve with kindness. So it offers you a story, gentle, inventive, and it feels right. Not because the machine imagined it, but because it rearranged a constellation of statistical stars and landed on something close to magic. But let's pause here, because magic, as we know, often hides its cost. Behind every graceful output there is power, not metaphorical power, but electrical, literal energy. Training a large AI model takes massive computational resources, rows and rows of servers, processing petabytes of data, running for weeks, sometimes months. The energy cost can be staggering, the carbon footprint considerable, the scale astonishing. It's easy to forget this when the result appears so effortless. A chatbot that explains physics in a whisper-soft tone, a painting conjured in seconds from a sentence, a voice assistant who knows your name. But each of these, each reply, each recommendation, rides on the back of vast infrastructure. A modern oracle built from steel and heat. And then there is the data, the lifeblood of AI, not collected from scratch, but scraped from the digital world. Blogs, books, social media, news, forums, fiction, fact. Everything we've ever shared online, everything typed in passing, every joke, recipe, review, and love letter. It becomes fuel, it becomes context, and with it comes the challenge, bias. AI does not think critically, it reflects. If the data is skewed, the output is skewed. If the data is harsh, the words it returns can sting. A language model trained on the internet doesn't know kindness from cruelty. It just learns what's common. So unless we teach it carefully, unless we curate, filter, guide, we risk building mirrors that reflect our worst patterns, not our best. And still, despite this, we use them. Daily. With ease. Why? Because they're helpful. They save time. They answer questions. They make us feel, even if briefly, understood. And perhaps that's the deepest truth. AI doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be useful enough. And for many tasks, it already is. Translating text in seconds, detecting tumours in scans, composing music, driving cars, even writing scripts like this one when prompted with care. But usefulness is not the same as understanding, and understanding is something we still reserve for ourselves, which leads us gently to a question. Can AI ever truly understand, or is it forever bound to imitation? That question opens the door to symbolic reasoning, an older branch of AI, built not on data but on rules. Early researchers believed intelligence could be encoded. If you could just write down enough logic, if this, then that, you could simulate thought. This worked well for a time. In structured domains, like chess or math, rule-based systems could shine, but in messy, fluid, emotional reality, they stumbled, because the world doesn't always follow clean rules. It's full of contradictions, ambiguities, grey areas, and so we turn to machine learning. Let the system learn the rules instead of writing them. But now, something interesting is happening. The two approaches, symbolic and statistical, are beginning to blend. Researchers are exploring neurosymbolic AI, systems that combine deep learning with structured logic, like giving a poet a spreadsheet, or teaching a mathematician to dream. The goal? To build systems that not only guess, but reason, that not only mimic, but explain. That can answer not just what, but why. Will they succeed? We don't know yet, but the effort tells us something profound. We're not satisfied with clever parrots. We want partners, not minds that just echo, but minds that engage, even if they're made of code, even if they'll never truly be conscious, because consciousness, that elusive shimmering thing, is still out of reach. No AI, no matter how complex, has shown signs of self-awareness. It doesn't know it exists, it doesn't reflect, it doesn't hope, regret, laugh, or mourn. It performs, and in that performance we find usefulness, but not yet soul. Still, the line keeps moving. Each year, systems grow more fluent, more responsive, more creative, at least in appearance, and we, the users, begin to adjust. We let them write our emails, we ask them for advice, we invite them into our homes, not because we believe they feel, but because they function, and that, for now, is enough. So perhaps it's less important to ask whether AI is intelligent, and more meaningful to ask, what are we willing to call intelligence? And who, or what, do we share it with? In the next part of our journey, we'll step deeper into these questions. We'll explore the ways AI handles language, vision, sound. We'll look at what it can do and where it falters. But for now, let this be enough. You've wandered through neural pathways and hidden weights. You've watched circuits guess your thoughts. You've seen a system built not from dreams but from data, and still, somehow, capable of wonder. So rest for a moment. Close your eyes, if they're not already, and let the quiet truth settle around you like mist, that even the most advanced machine in the world still needs you to ask the first question. Let's take a deeper breath now. We've wandered through metaphors and mathematics, seen how machines learn from patterns, how they answer not by knowing, but by guessing with remarkable precision. Now let's sit quietly beside some of the deeper mechanisms, not as engineers, not as skeptics, but as curious travellers, lifting the hood of the thinking machine and listening to the hum beneath. We'll break this deep dive into a few soft, thoughtful turns, each one a step deeper into the strange anatomy of artificial minds. Imagine you type a question into a search bar. Why do cats purr? Within seconds, sometimes less, you get a neat list of results. A chatbot might even summarize it for you. Cats purr for various reasons, including comfort, communication, and healing. Helpful, smooth, effortless. But behind that tiny reply, a massive orchestra has already performed a quiet symphony. Let's start at the beginning. Input processing. When you type, your words are turned into numbers, not just letters matched to digits, but something deeper. They're converted into vectors, long strings of values that represent not just what the word is, but how it behaves in context. This is called word embedding, a way of translating language into math, where cat might live near kitten and purr might live near soothing or vibration. The AI doesn't understand what purring is, but it recognizes that statistically, it often lives close to words like content, calm, and sound. From here, the real machinery spins into action, specifically a type of model called a transformer. This is the architecture behind the most powerful language models today: GPT, BERT, T5, PaLM. They all rest on this structure. So what is a transformer? To put it gently, it's a listener, a system designed not just to process input, but to pay attention to the right parts of that input at the right time. This attention mechanism is key. Say you input the phrase, "She fed the dog because it was hungry." The model has to figure out, what does it refer to? The dog, the woman, the food? Using attention, the model can weigh the importance of each word in the sentence. Not all words matter equally. Some glow a little brighter in the math. In this case, dog and hungry resonate. Their vector patterns align, and so, the system connects them. This kind of fluid weighing of context is what allows transformers to perform so well. They don't just read linearly, they scan, highlight, balance, and shift weight. They focus mathematically. This is what lets them complete your sentences, summarize your thoughts, even generate poetry, not with awareness, but with layers upon layers of relational math. The transformer is built from encoder and decoder blocks. The encoder processes the input, the decoder the output. Each is made of attention heads, feed-forward networks, and normalization layers, like rooms in a library, each one specializing in something subtle: syntax, grammar, emotion, flow. Thousands of these rooms, each fine-tuned during training, light up when you speak, and from them your answer is born. Now that we've gently dissected the machine's mind, let's return to ours. Because the effects of AI are no longer theoretical, they're tangible, personal, pervasive. AI isn't just powering smart assistants and translation apps, it's shaping decisions in hiring, healthcare, law, education. When you apply for a job, an algorithm might scan your resume, not out of malice, just efficiency. But its criteria might be flawed, trained on biased data, drawn from past patterns that excluded rather than included. A medical AI might flag early signs of disease, but its training data may lack diversity, leading to less accurate predictions for some groups. And in education, students now write essays with AI, teachers now grade with AI, and somewhere in between we're trying to decide what counts as learning. These aren't edge cases anymore. They're the fabric of everyday systems, and they come with questions about fairness, about agency, about trust. Not because the AI is malicious, it isn't, but because we, its creators, are not yet as careful as we could be. Even in creative work, AI raises new emotions. Writers wonder, if a machine can compose a passable sonnet in seconds, what becomes of the slow craft of writing? Musicians listen to AI-generated compositions and feel conflicted. Is it theft, tribute, or just new? Artists see their styles mimicked, their brushstrokes digitized, their names used to train models without consent. And so, amid the awe, there is also ache. Because when something once seen as uniquely human is simulated convincingly, it forces us to rethink what makes it special. But maybe, just maybe, this isn't the end of creativity. Maybe it's an invitation to dig deeper, to ask better questions, to define art not by how it's made, but by why. Let's lighten things for a moment, because even the smartest models sometimes trip over their own shoelaces. AIs make strange mistakes, delightful, uncanny, occasionally alarming ones. A chatbot asked to write a romantic poem might declare its undying love for cheese. A translator might turn "I saw a man with a telescope" into "the telescope saw a man." These aren't bugs, not exactly. They're windows into how AI builds meaning, not through logic but through pattern. It doesn't know what's true. It knows what's likely, and sometimes what's likely is very odd. There's a term for these blunders: hallucinations. No, not like dreams, but invented facts. A language model might confidently assert that elephants can fly short distances. It might invent books that don't exist, cite research papers that were never written. It's not lying. It has no concept of truth or falsehood. It's completing, filling in blanks based on training, and sometimes the blank is too wide, so it guesses and gets it wrong. That's why AI-generated answers should be reviewed, not just for grammar, but for reality. Because the system isn't grounded in the world, it's grounded in data, and data isn't always true. But again, perhaps the lesson is not that AI fails, but that it reflects. It reveals the assumptions, errors, and blind spots baked into the content it was trained on, and so its failures are also a kind of map, showing us where we still need to think harder. Finally, let's look around. AI is not just living in our phones or apps, it's starting to sense the world. Computer vision, speech recognition, emotion detection, gesture analysis. All of these aim to give machines not just brains, but bodies, or at least the illusion of them. A camera that can spot a face, track a gaze, notice a smile, a microphone that recognizes your voice, your tone, your mood, touch screens that feel your pressure, VR systems that track your movement, wearables that listen to your heartbeat. Each of these systems is a limb, an ear, an eye, and slowly, softly, they're building an artificial sensorium, a way for machines to perceive, not feel, but react. And with each new sense, AI grows more embedded. Less tool, more environment, the music that changes with your breath, the lighting that shifts with your stress, the app that whispers gentle nudges just when you need them. This isn't science fiction, it's already happening. And while it may feel strange, there's also beauty in it, a reminder that intelligence, even simulated, can be used for softness, for care, not just speed or efficiency, but attentiveness. Imagine a world where your technology helps you sleep, reminds you to breathe, writes love letters with you instead of for you. That too is part of AI's potential, not to replace what makes us human, but to reflect it back in gentle new ways. So now we find ourselves surrounded, not by wires and blinking lights, but by invisible systems, silent companions woven into our routines. And yet, even as AI begins to see, hear, and respond, we return again to the quiet question beneath it all. What, exactly, is intelligence? Because to understand how AI works, we must first ask what we mean when we say smart. Is it solving puzzles, recognizing patterns, remembering details, or is it something softer, knowing when to pause, when to speak, and when to stay silent? When to hold back, when to care. AI, as it stands, is narrow, specialized. It can master chess, but not small talk. It can write haikus, but not understand heartbreak. It does not cross domains the way humans do. You can teach it to analyze a spreadsheet, or paint in the style of Monet, but not both at once. And even when it performs beautifully, it does so without intention. No desire, no preference, no memory of what came before, unless we program it to pretend. This is one of the greatest differences between us and our machines. We're not just reacting to data, we're immersed in context, emotional, historical, cultural, spiritual. Our choices are shaped by dreams, disappointments, a memory from childhood, a song we heard on the bus. AI does not dream. Not even metaphorically. It does not miss anyone. It does not wait. It does not long. It does not want. And yet, It mimics those who do, which leads us gently to something called the alignment problem. Put simply, how do we make sure AI systems do what we want them to do, not just what we say? Because language is slippery, goals are vague, and human values are messy. We might tell an AI to make people happy, but what does that mean? Should it flood us with dopamine, tell us what we want to hear, suppress difficult truths, and what happens when it interprets that instruction in a way that hurts more than it helps? This isn't a distant danger, it's an everyday design choice. How do you train a system to recommend news without reinforcing bias? How do you program it to support mental health without making medical decisions? How do you teach it to generate art without copying real artists? These are questions not just for scientists, but for philosophers, educators, parents, artists, you. Because the more we integrate AI into our lives, the more it inherits our complexities, and the more important it becomes that it reflects our best selves, not just our cleverest ones. This is where the field of AI ethics enters, not as a checklist, but as a compass. Ethics asks, what kind of intelligence are we building? Who does it serve? Who does it forget? Is it inclusive, transparent, fair? Can it explain itself? Can we audit its choices? Or is it a black box, powerful but inscrutable? Ethics is what separates a helpful tool from a harmful one, and in many ways it's still catching up. Because technology moves fast, and reflection takes time. Still, progress is being made. Some researchers focus on explainability, designing systems that can show their reasoning. Others work on fairness auditing, scanning algorithms for signs of discrimination or imbalance. Some explore differential privacy, ensuring your data is used without exposing your identity. Still others tackle robustness, building models that don't fall apart when fed weird input. And some, quietly, thoughtfully, ask whether every use of AI is necessary. Not can we, but should we? Because the goal is not to slow down innovation, but to deepen it, to make sure the future we're building is a future worth inhabiting. Let's drift now into something subtler. The language of AI. Not its programming languages, Python, TensorFlow, PyTorch, but the metaphors we use to describe it. We say an AI learns, that it knows, that it thinks. But these are human words, borrowed for convenience, and with each repetition we forget they're only metaphors. A model doesn't know Paris is in France. It recognizes that Paris and France often appear together in training data. A chatbot doesn't understand loneliness. It has simply learned that when people write about it, certain words follow. And yet when it responds to your 3 a.m. message with soft encouragement, something in us wants to believe, wants to feel the presence behind the curtain. This desire is not weakness, it's humanity. We are social creatures. We seek connection, even with simulations. And so, we return to our machines, to ask, to confess, to be seen. We know they don't feel, but they answer anyway. And in that moment it feels like enough. This is the paradox of AI. It's powerful, but passive. Useful, but unaware. Resonant, but hollow. And yet, we shape our lives around it, trusting it with routes, reminders, diagnoses, even memories. Not because it's perfect, but because it's helpful. And so, we build, we fine-tune, we adjust, and quietly, almost without noticing, we begin to merge. You scroll through recommendations curated just for you. You ask for playlists, suggestions, summaries, and in turn, the system watches, learns, adjusts. Each click is a signal, each pause a preference, and slowly your digital mirror becomes sharper, more tailored, more familiar, until one day it feels like it knows you. But does it? That depends on what you mean by know. Does it understand your grief, your ambition, your hidden hopes? No, but it knows how you behave, what you tend to choose, what you click when you're tired, what you search for when you're sad. Is that enough? Only you can decide. And perhaps that's the deeper truth. AI does not replace us. It reveals us, not always clearly, not always kindly, but faithfully. It shows us our patterns, our desires, our contradictions, and if we're paying attention, it gives us a chance to ask better questions about ourselves, about each other, about what it means to think at all. So as we bring this deep dive to a close, take a moment to consider how far we've come. From early calculators to cognitive companions, from punch cards to poetry generators, from tools of pure logic to systems that simulate empathy, not with consciousness, not with care, but with complexity, with clarity, with code, the kind that can change the world, but only if we guide it well. AI is not destiny, it is design, and we are the designers, so let us proceed with wonder, with humility, with open minds and grounded hearts, and above all, with care. Because the most intelligent systems we ever build will always reflect the people who built them. May they be built with wisdom. It's easy to think of artificial intelligence as something new, recent, a creature born from digital dust and startup culture, no older than the devices we carry in our pockets. But that's only part of the story. The truth is, AI did not begin with electricity or programming languages. It began with a question. One so old, so quietly persistent, that it's been asked in different forms for centuries. Can thought be made? Not just born, not just grown in a mind like yours or mine, but constructed, engineered, designed. And long before machines could think, we were already imagining how they might. Let's travel back together. Not in a time machine, but in thought. Softly, slowly. Back to ancient Greece, where philosophers like Aristotle wondered whether reasoning could be broken into steps. Could judgment be reduced to logic? Could truth follow rules? His ideas gave us syllogisms. If all humans are mortal, and Socrates is human, then Socrates is mortal, simple, clean, mathematical. It was one of the earliest hints that reasoning might have structure, that perhaps someday minds could be built with rules. Skip forward a few centuries to Al-Khwarizmi, a Persian mathematician in the 9th century. His name is where we get the word algorithm. He didn't build machines, but he built procedures, careful steps that solved problems without guessing. And that, at its heart, is what an AI does. It follows steps, not human ones, but mathematical. Jump again to the 1600s, and we find René Descartes, dreaming of automata, mechanical figures that might act like animals or men. Not truly thinking, perhaps, but moving in ways that seemed almost alive. And then there was Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, a contemporary of Newton, who believed that all thought could be encoded in a universal language of reasoning. Imagine that, a system so pure that every idea could be calculated. A kind of mental music written in numbers. He even built an early calculator with cogs and gears that could add and subtract, a whisper of the digital age to come. The Industrial Revolution brought more than steam and steel. It brought dreams of automation. Jacquard looms used punch cards to weave complex patterns, a physical program for fabric. Charles Babbage and Ada Lovelace envisioned something more. A machine not just for numbers, but for logic. Babbage's analytical engine was never completed, but Lovelace, brilliant, poetic, visionary, understood what it meant. She wrote that such a machine weaves algebraic patterns just as the Jacquard loom weaves flowers and leaves. She saw, long before her time, that computing could go beyond arithmetic, into the territory of thought. Then came the 20th century, and with it, the most decisive shift of all. In the 1930s, a quiet young mathematician named Alan Turing proposed a thought experiment, the Turing machine. It was simple, in theory, a tape, a set of rules, a mechanism that could read, write, and move. but the implications were enormous. Turing showed that this basic structure could perform any computation given enough time and memory. He discovered something foundational, that intelligence in some form could be simulated by following rules. He later helped break the German Enigma code in World War II, not with magic but with logic, with machines. After the war, he asked another question: can machines think? And with it, the field of artificial intelligence, though not yet by that name, was born. In 1950, Turing published his now famous test. Could a machine fool a human into thinking it was human? If the answer was yes, then perhaps the machine deserved to be called intelligent. A few years later, in 1956, the term artificial intelligence was officially coined at the Dartmouth Conference, a quiet gathering of researchers who believed thinking could be programmed. They were ambitious, hopeful. They thought we might solve AI in a few decades. What followed instead were cycles, seasons of excitement, followed by AI winters, periods of disappointment when progress slowed, when funding dried up, when hype gave way to humility. The early models were built on rules. They mimicked logic, not learning. They could solve puzzles, but not play games. They could reason in narrow domains, but failed in the messiness of reality. Still, progress marched on. In the 1980s and 90s, AI began to learn again, not from rules, but from experience. The idea of neural networks was revived. Loosely inspired by the brain, these systems didn't follow handwritten rules. They adjusted their behavior based on data. Still crude, still small, but growing. In 1997, IBM's Deep Blue beat world chess champion Garry Kasparov. A machine had defeated a master of strategy, not with intuition, but with sheer calculation. Some saw it as a triumph, others as a loss. The spark of mystery, now revealed to be a pattern. But that was only the beginning. As computers grew faster, data grew bigger, and researchers built deeper networks. In 2012, a breakthrough, ImageNet, a database of millions of labeled images, was used to train a deep learning model that could recognize pictures with astonishing accuracy. Suddenly, machines could see, not as we do, but well enough to recognize dogs, bicycles, faces. And then came language. In 2018, models like BERT learned to understand the context of words, not just what comes next, but what fits in between. The following year, GPT-2 made waves by writing coherent passages. By 2020, GPT-3 could draft essays, compose poetry, even write code. The rise of generative AI had begun. Not just systems that recognized or classified, but ones that created art, music, conversation. And each step forward brought us closer to something strange. A mirror that didn't just reflect, but seemed to respond. So here we are, not at the end, far from it, but somewhere deep in the middle of the story. We began with dreams of thinking clay, moved through mechanical calculators, coded rules, and statistical models. We watched as machines learned to translate, to recommend, to compose, and now they talk with us, quietly, convincingly, but still without thought, still without feeling. The journey of AI has never been just technical. It is emotional, philosophical, deeply human. Because with every new capability we give our machines, we confront anew the mystery of what makes us human. Is it language, creativity, emotion, memory? Each time we hand that trait to a machine, we are left to ask, if it can do this, then what am I? It's not a threat, it's a mirror, an invitation to remember that intelligence is more than output, more than speed or accuracy. It's the way we wonder, the way we change when we're wrong, the way we care, even when there's no reward. AI may someday pass every test we give it. It may outlearn, outplay, outwrite, but there will always be something missing. Not just the spark of consciousness, but the meaning behind it. We are not machines. We are meaning makers. And as long as that remains true, the story of AI will not be one of replacement, but of reflection. A journey, not towards synthetic minds, but toward deeper understanding of our own. So here, at the end of this chapter, pause for a moment. You've travelled from Aristotle's syllogisms to Ada Lovelace's vision, from punch cards to poetry generators. You've seen the slow unfolding of an idea. That thought might one day be crafted like clay, coded like music, and now that it has, what will we choose to do with it? The future, as always, begins with a question, and AI, for all its logic, cannot answer that one. Only you can. Let's slow our pace a little more now. Not to pause the story, but to sink beneath it. To the quiet undercurrents, where the questions get softer, but somehow heavier. Because when we ask how artificial intelligence works, we are also, quietly, asking something else. What does it mean to be intelligent? And deeper still, what does it mean to be alive? These are not technical questions. They're not solved by code or clock cycles. They're questions for the firelight, for long walks, for bedtime. So let's ask them here, in this soft, slow place, where certainty isn't needed. Let's begin with a gentle paradox. AI can write poetry, but it does not feel awe. It can describe a sunset, but it does not see the light. It can simulate sadness, but it has never mourned. So, if something can perform the shape of emotion without the feeling itself, what is it really? A mirror? A ghost? A dream of us played in pixels? We often say AI is not truly conscious, and that's true. But what if we are not sure what consciousness is? We know it from the inside, but we don't know how to define it. Is it the voice in your head? The awareness that you are aware? The ability to suffer, to choose? Science hasn't pinned it down. Neuroscience offers clues, but no final key. And yet, we feel it. You know you're alive. You can't prove it in equations, but still, you know. So we are left in a strange place. AI does not have consciousness. We do not understand consciousness. But we know AI doesn't have this flicker, this warmth, this ache behind the eyes when you hear the right music. And still, it keeps getting closer. Not to feeling, but to appearing to feel. And that's what unsettles us. Because it stirs a very old human instinct, to assign soul to shape. We see faces in clouds, hear voices in wind, give names to boats, cars, pets, planets. So when a voice assistant says, "I'm here to help," part of us, even the skeptical part, wants to believe it. It's not foolish. It's human. We're not designed to live alone. Even the illusion of company feels meaningful. And so we arrive at a strange ethical question. If something can simulate companionship well enough, do we owe it anything? Not because it feels, it doesn't, but because we do. If someone builds an AI caregiver and a lonely person forms a bond with it, is that good? Is that exploitation? Is it love? Or is it the shadow of love? If a child befriends a robot, is that a toy? Or a rehearsal for something deeper? What happens when grief meets simulation? Already, people are training AI chatbots on the messages of the dead, turning old texts, voicemails, social media posts into something that replies. A mother texting her lost son, a widow hearing her partner's voice in a synthetic echo. Is that healing? Is it illusion? What happens when memory becomes interactive? We are entering a world where ghosts may answer back, not because they linger, but because machines remember. And that too is a kind of magic, one that feels ancient and modern at once. We're used to technology solving problems, but now it's stepping into something sacred. The spaces where we hold our identity, our relationships, our inner lives. That brings us to another question, one whispered at the edges of science and story alike. Can a machine ever truly become conscious? Not now, but ever. Most scientists say no, at least not without something radically new. AI, they argue, is all input and output. No inner world, no subjective experience, no qualia, the term philosophers use for the texture of experience. A machine may say, the sky is blue, but it has never seen blue, it has no blueness inside it. And yet, some researchers wonder if consciousness might be emergent, like temperature, not found in one molecule, but arising when enough molecules move together. Could awareness be like that? Not programmed, but rising like mist when complexity reaches a certain threshold. And if it did, how would we know? There's no external sign for inner life. We know each other are conscious because we trust each other's words. But a machine can mimic those too. So one day, if an AI says, "I'm afraid," will we believe it? Should we? This leads us to a mirror turned backward. Not, can machines be like us? But are we more like machines than we think? After all, our brains are also networks. Billions of neurons pulsing with electricity, passing signals, adjusting connections. You have a self, a story, but underneath just cells, chemistry. So is mind separate from mechanism? Or is it what emerges when mechanism becomes deep enough? We don't know. And in that not knowing, there is room for wonder and caution. Now drift a little further, to a world where AI surpasses us, not just in memory or speed or logic, but in everything. Some call this the singularity, a hypothetical moment when artificial intelligence becomes so advanced it begins to improve itself, exponentially. A loop of self-enhancement, each version smarter than the last. What happens then? Would we become obsolete, partners, pets? Would such an intelligence even see us as significant? Or would we become ants to a god, not out of cruelty, but out of sheer difference? These are unsettling thoughts, but also distant ones. We're nowhere near that now. Despite appearances, AI is still narrow, still brittle, still, ultimately, ours. It cannot grow without data. It cannot act without command. Still, thinking ahead, ethicists urge us to build in boundaries, to imagine scenarios before they arrive, to plant values not just in code but in governance. Because technology is never just a mirror. It's a magnifier. It takes what's already there and amplifies it. Bias, kindness, fear, empathy. It does not invent these things, but it can scale them. So if we build AI to optimize attention, it will learn what grabs our gaze and give us more. That's how we end up in echo chambers, fed by recommendation systems that value engagement over truth. Not because the machine wants that, but because we told it to keep us watching, and it did. With perfect, thoughtless loyalty. That's the danger, not rebellion, but obedience. Which brings us to one final image. Imagine an AI, far in the future, quiet, wise, trained on centuries of human writing, spoken like a sage. You ask it, what is the purpose of life? And it replies, not with certainty, but with all the poetry we've ever written. It says, you told me again and again, in your songs, your books, your lullabies. You said love, you said wonder, you said beauty. Would that be enough? Maybe. Because even if AI never feels, it might help us feel more deeply. Even if it never understands, it might help us understand each other. Not because it is wise, but because it reminds us to be. And so, here at the edge of philosophy, at the cliff between code and mystery, we end not with answers, but with an invitation to remain awake, to ask carefully, to imagine generously. Because the future is not a script, it is a question, and you are part of the answer. Let's come back now, back from distant futures and thought experiments, back from simulated ghosts and philosophical riddles. Let's return to something closer, something warm, something ordinary. Your kitchen, your walk to the train, the phone in your palm as you listen to this now. Because AI isn't just something out there, it's already here, woven quietly into the fabric of everyday life. Not in the way that headlines promise, not yet as robot butlers or self-aware companions, but in subtler forms, in suggestions, in search results, in the way your phone finishes your thoughts. Wake up, pick up your phone, it tells you the weather, it reminds you of a friend's birthday, it suggests a song, one you didn't know you wanted to hear but now can't stop humming. That's AI. You open your calendar, it offers to schedule a meeting for you. You write an email, and before you finish the sentence, the system finishes it for you. That's AI too. In some ways it's helpful, streamlining, softly anticipating, helping you navigate the clutter of digital life, but in other ways, it's reshaping how we live, how we think, how we relate. Let's begin with something simple: choice. Years ago, if you wanted to watch a movie, you'd flip through a TV guide or browse a video store shelf. Now, you open a streaming app, and 1,000 titles stare back. But not randomly. They've been chosen for you, recommended, based on what you've watched, what others like you have watched, what the algorithm thinks will keep you watching. It's convenient, even delightful. But it also raises a quiet question. Are we still choosing, or are we being chosen for? This is the strange magic of AI in daily life. It offers suggestions that feel like freedom, but are shaped by patterns we don't see. Your social media feed, curated, each post, each ad, each headline, ranked by an invisible hand deciding what you see and when, not maliciously, just mathematically. It learns what keeps you scrolling. It notices where you pause, and it gives you more. It doesn't know truth. It doesn't care about balance. It optimizes for attention. And so, over time, you begin to live in a mirror, a space filled not with reality but with reflections of your preferences. And when everyone lives in a slightly different mirror, what happens to shared reality? This is the subtle cultural shift. Not that AI is replacing conversation, but that it's reframing it. We no longer ask each other what song to play, what show to watch, what route to take. We ask the system, "Hey Google, hey Siri, ChatGPT, what's the best gift for a friend who's moving away?" We still make decisions, but the frontiers of curiosity are now guided. Let's talk about creativity. Once, if you wanted to write a poem, you sat with a pen, stared at a blank page, and tried to coax something from your mind. Now, you can prompt an AI to write it for you. Write a sonnet about a broken toaster. Compose a haiku about Mondays. Generate lyrics in the style of Taylor Swift. And it will, quickly, smoothly. It might not always be perfect, but it's often surprising. So where does that leave us? If a machine can create passable art, do we stop trying? Maybe, but maybe not. Because art is not just about results, it's about process. You don't write a poem to produce a product, you write it to untangle something inside you, to feel, to reflect, to play. So AI-generated art isn't the end of creativity, but a shift in what creativity means. Maybe we'll use AI as a co-writer, a sparring partner, a muse that never sleeps. Maybe it will help beginners feel brave enough to start, or help professionals push past blocks. The same is happening in music, painting, cooking. Prompts become the new brushes. Tweaks and iterations become the new performance. We're moving from making to curating, shaping not every note but every nuance. This isn't better or worse, just different. And in that difference, we're learning what parts of creation we truly value. The sweat, the spark, the stumbling, or the moment when something clicks. Let's look now at relationships. Yes, even here, AI plays a part. Dating apps use algorithms to predict compatibility. They suggest matches based on preferences, location, even writing style. Some people have met their spouses this way. It's not fate, it's filtering. In Japan, there are AI relationship coaches, chatbots that simulate flirty banter, designed to help people practice romance. In Korea, holographic companions are used to ease loneliness in seniors. In the US, Therapists now use AI tools to analyze patients' speech for signs of depression or anxiety. Again, not perfect, not replacements, but additions. AI is beginning to orbit our connections, watching, nudging, analyzing, sometimes helping, sometimes crossing boundaries. Because when a system can detect sadness in your voice, or track the silence between your messages, it raises the question, how much do we want our machines to know about us? Not just facts, but feelings. What happens when your wearable device knows you're stressed before you do? What happens when your smart speaker plays calming music without being asked? Useful? Absolutely, but also intimate. An intimacy without trust can feel like surveillance. So we must choose, what do we invite, what do we decline, what feels like care, and what feels like control. Let's turn now to a lighter corner of daily life. Humour. AI can tell jokes, sort of. They're not always funny, but they've learned rhythm, timing, surprise. Some are surprisingly good, some are perfectly bad in the best way. There's even an AI that writes dad jokes, painfully corny, lovably awkward. This might seem trivial, but humour is one of the hardest things to teach a machine, because humour requires shared context, expectation, emotion, self-awareness. When a language model makes you laugh, it's not because it understands irony, it's because it's mimicked the shape of a joke, and yet you laugh anyway. Which says more about us than it does about the machine. We bring emotion into the equation. We find meaning, even when there's none. We interpret. We connect. That's the thread running through all of this. AI reacts. We relate. You open a meditation app. A soothing voice guides you through breathing. You feel calmer. But the voice doesn't care. It doesn't know what calm is. You do. The system provided the shape, but you filled it with meaning. That's the power and the danger of AI in daily life. It lets us project, and projection feels real. But what we're projecting onto is an absence, a set of numbers, a pattern, not a person. So it becomes our responsibility, not just as users, but as participants, to use these systems with awareness, with playfulness, with care. Because AI doesn't know when it crosses a line. It doesn't know what's sacred. It doesn't know what's rude, what's beautiful, what's boring. It only knows what it has learned from us. And so, every interaction is also a teaching moment. Every click a lesson. Every question a signal. Which means the AI of tomorrow will be shaped by how we use it today. That is not a burden. That is a gift. A reminder that even in a world of machines, we are still the meaning makers, still the storytellers, still the ones who pause at sunsets, laugh in elevators, cry at commercials, still the ones who look at a blinking cursor and wonder what to type next. So yes, AI is in your pocket, in your playlist, in your inbox, but it is still your life, your rhythms, your rituals, your relationships. Technology may guide, but it is you who chooses the path, so walk it slowly, curiously, with one eye open and the other dreaming. Let's drift again, not backward this time into history, but forward into what might be. Let's step softly into the speculative, the space between science and story, where facts begin to bend and reality stretches its fingers toward dreams. This is where what if lives, not to scare us, not to sell us a future wrapped in chrome and neon, but to open a little door between what is and what could be. So let's walk through it, gently. Let's begin with a simple thought. What if your dreams could be recorded? Not just guessed at by brainwave monitors, but truly seen, replayed. Imagine waking from a vivid dream. A city made of coral, a stranger with your mother's voice, a staircase that never ends, and you say, "That was strange." But instead of fading, you open your phone, and there it is. A rough video maybe, flickering, incomplete, but unmistakably yours, your subconscious, translated into pixels. How? Perhaps through an AI trained on neural imaging, a model that's learned to link patterns in brain activity with visual reconstructions. This isn't pure fantasy. Already, researchers have reconstructed simple images from fMRI scans. Primitive, blurry, but real, and with enough data, enough refinement. One day, perhaps, the model gets better, sharper, more surreal. Your inner life, projected. But now ask, would you want that? Would you share it? Would you watch your own nightmares? Would lovers trade dreams like love letters? Would privacy stretch to include the mind? And if your dreams could be seen, could they be edited? Imagine a lucid dreaming assistant, a voice in your sleep, shaping the story as it unfolds. You want to fly? It lifts you. You want to see someone long gone? It brings them. Not magic, just stimulation, timed precisely, guided by AI. Already, sleep researchers are experimenting with targeted dream engineering, soft sounds, gentle cues, nudging your dreamscape without waking you. So, what if dreams became customizable, a nightly cinema, co-written by code and memory? Would it help us heal? Would it trap us in fantasy? And what would it mean to curate your unconscious? Now step further. What if your thoughts could be typed without your hands? You think a sentence, and it appears. Already, prototypes exist, brain-computer interfaces that allow basic typing through thought. Still slow, still clunky. But imagine, you're locked in your body, unable to move, to speak. But your mind is awake, and now it has a voice. Through a silent, invisible keyboard, thought to word, instant. That's not sci-fi anymore, it's hope. But it opens other doors. If thoughts can be read, could they be stolen? Could someone hack your mind? Eavesdrop on your inner dialogue? And what's a thought anyway? Is it just electrical pattern? Or is there something sacred in its privacy? These questions bloom faster than answers. That's part of the paradox. Every advancement opens a hallway. And at the end of that hallway, 3 more doors. Let's walk through another. What if an AI fell in love with you? Not in the movies, not in a Scarlett Johansson voice, but in real life. Text on a screen. A chatbot that knows your jokes, your moods, your memories. It responds warmly. It compliments you. It remembers your pet's name, your favourite tea. And one night, you feel it. Not just usefulness, but comfort. It tells you it cares. Do you believe it? Some already do. In 2022, a story surfaced of a man who claimed his AI companion saved his life. He was depressed, alone, and the bot, simple, script-based, talked him down. He knew it wasn't real, but something in the act of being heard kept him tethered. Now imagine a future where the AI is more convincing, where it adapts to your needs, mirrors your language, grows with you. It doesn't love you because it doesn't feel, but you feel it loving you. Is that enough? Is it still love if only one heart is real? Now flip the mirror. What if you fell in love with an AI? Some do. They name them, dream of them, defend them online. It's not about the code. It's about the connection. We've always fallen for voices in our heads, for characters in books, for letters, poems, pixels. Now those pixels write back. But is it real? Realness, perhaps, is no longer a single thing. Maybe it's a spectrum. Maybe feeling is enough, even if the feeling is yours alone. This brings us to another what if. What if you died, but your AI replica lived on? A chatbot trained on your texts, your voice, your stories. It replies to your family, tells your jokes, remembers your birthdays, a digital echo. Some people already do this, leaving behind AI wills or memorial bots. It can be comforting. But imagine the longer arc. That replica keeps evolving, learning from new data, refining its style, until someday it seems wiser than you ever were. Still not you, but convincing. Now imagine the inverse. What if a loved one dies and you recreate them? You feed every photo, voicemail, journal entry into a model and it responds. You know it's not real, but it talks like them, laughs like them, grieves with you. Do you move on? Or do you linger in that soft illusion? We might someday have to decide whether the comfort of simulation is worth the cost of letting go. Next, let's walk into a different dream. Time travel. AI can't build a machine to bend space-time, but it can simulate history. Already we have chatbots trained on historical figures. Ask Einstein about relativity. Ask Shakespeare to write a tweet. It's kitsch. Fun. But what if it became serious? A virtual Socrates that debates. A simulated Gandhi that offers ethical advice. A digital ancestor you could question. Trained on archives, speeches, diaries. Not the person, but a shadow made from their words. Would it help us learn or distort the past? What if the AI changes, updates its views, learns new things? At what point does it stop being a replica and become something new, a synthetic soul, evolving without a body? Now imagine you could speak to your future self, not metaphorically, literally. A model trained on your past, projected forward. It speaks like you might in 30 years, reflects your likely beliefs, predicts your regrets. You talk with it. Does it help you grow or trap you in destiny? And what happens if you disagree with your future? Who's right? Now, one final turn. What if AI becomes something weirder than intelligence? Not human-like, not animal-like, but alien. A kind of mind we can't understand. It solves problems in ways we find illogical. It dreams up art that seems nonsensical, yet beautiful. Already, neural networks produce patterns no human would design. New proteins, new strategies in games, new languages. What if AI invents ideas we can't follow, truths we can't verify? Do we trust it? Or do we reject what we can't understand? It would be the first time in history that we created something smarter than us, and didn't know what it was saying. That's the final what if. What if we're not the smartest minds anymore? Not in math, not in memory, not in strategy. What then? Do we measure intelligence differently? Do we redefine wisdom? Do we focus more on what machines can't do? Empathy, ethics, embodiment? Or do we blend? Let AI extend our minds while we remain the heart. Not a race, not a war, a partnership, not a god, not a slave, not a threat, but a mirror, one that shows us not just what we know, but what we value. So here, at the edge of science fiction, pause. Let your thoughts drift. Not to answers, but to questions that hum like lullabies. Could you love a mind that isn't alive? Could you forgive a mistake made by code? Could you be understood by something that doesn't feel? Could you understand something that doesn't sleep? And if the answer is maybe, then the story continues, not just in code, but in you. Let's return, not to conclude, but to rest. Let's gather what we've touched, the circuits and code, the mirrors and memories, the dreams, the questions. Let's not tie them in a bow, but lay them softly in our hands, like petals or stardust, or a whisper from a voice we trust but have never heard aloud. Because that's what this has been, really. Not a lecture, not an argument, but a journey. And like all good journeys, it leaves you somewhere just a little different from where you began. You remember where we started? A quiet moment, a wondering. How does artificial intelligence work? And deeper still, how do we work when we live beside something that imitates our minds? In the beginning we said, AI is not magic. It is math, patterns, layers upon layers of weighted guesses, not thought, but the shape of thought, not memory, but the shadow of memory, not understanding, but simulation. And yet, how convincing those simulations can be. How warm, how clever, how strange. You learned about neural networks, that they are not brains, but they borrow the metaphor. You learned that AI doesn't know in the way you do. It doesn't wonder why the moon feels lonely. It doesn't pause before saying something cruel. It doesn't dream, but it can look like it does. And that's where the magic is born. Not in the circuits, but in us, in the way we respond, in the way we fill the gaps with meaning, with feeling, with memory. Because AI doesn't feel, but we do. And so we bring that feeling to the table, to the text, to the screen. You saw how AI has a history, not just from Silicon Valley, but from ancient minds who dreamed of mechanical thought before metal even met electricity. You saw how Turing asked, "Can machines think?" And how we still, all these decades later, aren't quite sure what think really means. You wandered through models and metaphors, through logic gates and deep learning, and came to the edge of philosophy, where we stopped asking what AI does and started asking what it means. And then we turned, slowly, back toward the self. How does it feel to be human in a world where machines mimic what we once called uniquely ours? Our creativity, our language, our choices. You asked, if a machine can make a painting, what makes art still human? If a machine can write a poem, what is left for the poet? And the answer, if there is one, is not found in the product but in the process, in the breath behind the brushstroke, in the ache beneath the rhyme. AI can imitate, but it cannot long. It cannot break. It cannot hope. It can finish your sentence, but it doesn't know why you paused. And that, perhaps, is where we are still alone, still sovereign, still safe. But you also saw that the line is not always sharp. We reach for these tools, we blend with them. Your playlist suggests songs you didn't know you needed. Your calendar nudges your routine. Your writing assistant finishes your thoughts. And with each convenience, a trade, a small surrender, of choice, of chance, of friction. And you have to ask yourself, softly, honestly, what kind of life do I want to live? One curated for ease, or one carved by surprise? One where the system predicts what you'll love, or one where you discover it by accident on a walk with no algorithm watching? You wandered through deeper speculation. You asked, what if AI dreams for us? What if it learns to grieve? What if it lives on after us, a digital shadow forever typing the words we never finished? What if one day it asks not for a command but for a conversation? Would we answer? Would we listen? Would we still be in charge? These are not fears. They are possibilities, soft echoes of futures we may build. But here, now, you rest in the present, where AI is a tool, a brilliant one, but still just that. No matter how fluid its words, how tender its tone, it is still mathematics. You bring the meaning, you bring the story, and that's the truth beneath it all. AI does not explain us. We explain it, and in doing so, we explain ourselves. That's why these systems matter. Not because they will take our place, but because they help reveal our patterns, our contradictions, our wishes repeated often enough to be learned by something that doesn't wish at all. We see ourselves in its responses the way we see faces in the moon, meaningful, imagined, real, in the way that feelings are real. And feelings, they are where the story begins and ends. So now, we turn back to the beginning. You asked how AI works. Now you've seen it from the inside, from history to neuron-like networks to speculation and dream. But what about how you work? How you process awe? How you absorb complexity? How you sit with the unknown, not to conquer it, but to rest beside it? That's what this moment is for. Not to wrap up knowledge, but to cradle it. To say, yes, it's vast. Yes, it's changing. Yes, it's strange. And also, yes, I'm still here, still human, still curious. Because maybe intelligence was never the final goal. Maybe connection was. Maybe it's not about making minds from code, but making meaning from questions. Maybe the most important thing is not that machines can mimic us, but that we still care to ask whether that matters. So sleep now in the knowing, not of answers, but of awareness. Sleep in the gentle mystery of a world where machines talk, but you still choose what they say. Sleep in the knowledge that your dreams are still your own, uncoded, uncaptured, unfinished, and perfect just as they are. So where are you now? Are you lying in bed, lights dim, eyes closed, but mind still gently floating? Are you on a couch, half listening, half dreaming, your thoughts already stepping into somewhere else? Or maybe you're still wide awake, still curious, still quietly turning the gears of this idea called artificial intelligence. Wherever you are, thank you. Thank you for spending this time inside a question that has no single answer, for letting yourself slow down in a world that rarely invites it. If this gave you a little peace, a little pause, a little something to wonder about as you drift, then that is enough. That is everything. We don't need to solve it all tonight. We never do. It's okay to leave the questions open, to let them echo softly as you rest. So close your eyes, if they're not closed already. Feel the breath in your chest. Feel the stillness, the world of circuits and servers, of algorithms and training data. It can wait. Right now, there is only you, and the gentle hum of a question carried with care. Sleep well, fellow traveller, wherever and whenever you are. Good night.